Let's go ahead and just dive in here.
Sounds good, Joel. All right. Speakers, I think we've done intros, but just in case if you're looking for faces as well, and we have Joel and myself. I'm on the right, naturally. Joel's on the left.
There we go.
All right, let's talk about the momentum and innovation of Teams, right? I think that we've seen a lot of the articles talking about, 75 million daily active users for Teams, which is huge because as of March, they were at 44. So that's a 30 something percent jump over the course of COVID, right? Because a lot of that started in February to March timeframe, and we've all been pushed into these remote work situations. And since then, of course, Microsoft has touted the 75 million mark, 200 million meeting participants in a single day, and of course, 4.1 Teams meeting minutes generated. And on top of that, you also have a host of features that have rolled out since we've all been in quarantine and since we've all really taken to the Teams platform. Some of us strategically, some of us reactively, but regardless, we're all here. So then the focus now becomes, how do we make the most of this innovation and this investment that we've made, because we're all invested in the Microsoft 365 stack right now. We may even have two or three tools to do the same thing. I think we're all living that life. So then it really just becomes, a very dutiful thing to start telling our users about the platform and promoting the things that we're seeing. We talked about the 75 million users, but also, when you start looking at Teams as the unified communication as a service platform, whether it's Gartner for that or Gartner for the Magic Quadrant for meetings or even the Forrester Wave for unified communication as a service, Microsoft is in that leader quadrant for all those different areas. And we're making the investments. The technology is here to support us. So now it's really about how do we optimize that for the organization. But we can't go much further without saying that there are still challenges, right? We tout that 75 million mark, and that's awesome for active daily usage. But when you look at it, there's 258 total seats in 365, right? So when you look at all the users that are licensed within Office and Microsoft 365, you're looking at 258 million users. But we're still chomping at the bit with 75 million active users at any point in time, which means that number could go up and down depending on, regular usage. But daily active, we're looking at 75 million. And what we're looking to do also is solve a few of the problems that we're starting to see now, because we recognize Teams as a leading platform for chat and for collaboration, and now we're starting to get into meetings and voice, but we're still having some organizations struggling in some areas. The first area is, of course, organizations have struggled to drive adoption for productivity and data visualization tools already visible to employees, right? And that becomes a huge thing, and that's a winning play for Teams, right? Anytime you talk about Teams, you also talk about integrating information that's valuable to employees, and that's where a lot of our empowering message is really going to come from. And we're also going to review some tactics for doing so. Next, employees are constantly switching between applications, and they're losing time and momentum in their day. And that's a huge challenge to all of us because, Teams isn't our only application that we use for mission critical things. In fact, from a productivity perspective, some of us use it less. Some of us are still using email. And I think the overall goal here is that we want to bring some of that valuable information out of email, because we'll talk about why that's a problem in a second. And naturally, employees sometimes choose publicly available third-party communication tools. And some of those violate data security. They go against our best practices as an organization. They go against your internal governance plans and a lot of those other areas that are really challenging for today's, cloud-friendly world. At the same time, they're looking to reduce friction in their day. But now that you have Teams, it's just a matter of making sure we incorporate that properly, because there are many blind spots such as security, adoption, and governance that we really want to cover. And in order to do so, we have to have the right governance plan, the right adoption change management plan, and of course, an overall roadmap for how we're going to embrace that return on investment that we're really promising to our users.
Momentum around Teams has been huge, and I think it really
Absolutely.
comes down. Teams was already a really innovative platform that integrates this convergence of messaging, communication, collaboration, like all in one big package.
Hmm.
Plus, you talk about this being the hub of teamwork, and I'm sure we're going to talk more about that, but just the momentum, just kind of talking about that for a second. This is the fastest growing product in Microsoft history, and in some ways, from an enterprise perspective, the fastest growing product on the planet.
Right.
From an enterprise perspective. And when you talk about what that means and what that brings to an enterprise, it does require a lot more of the kind of rally call inside of an organization, which will lead to more of what we're talking about. But digital disruption or digital innovation, and what it provides a company a huge opportunity to kind of dust off a lot of where the technology has been, and look forward, as a platform. It's kind of exciting, I'd say, in terms of somebody who's in IT and been providing solutions. This really brings the whole package, I think.
Exactly. And we've spent a lot of time focusing on our information workers and our executives, right? And I think that one of the things that is going to kind of help us to take this to the next level and get past the 75 million, which is a great number for growth. That's awesome. At the same time, I feel like from a mobility perspective and a first line worker perspective, that's where a lot of these things are going to start moving. And we're going to start looking at visions for the future. And what we really look at Perficient is a team's first approach to Microsoft 365. And there are three core tenets to that. One, of course, is providing that single hub for reducing context switching and making decisions faster, providing internet content and collaboration in one place. This is that hub and that single pane of glass. And we've used different metaphors for it, but regardless, this is your hub, right? And in order for it to be the hub, you have to provide two crucial things to it. First, of course, is your corporate information that you have to know and your personalized information for what you're interested in, whether it's based on your location, your interest, or some other form factor, bringing that into the experience. Because one thing that you'll find is that as you start using Teams more, you also want to hit people where they are, which means that you may find that users are using the internet less or using Yammer less and Teams more. It doesn't make any of those things right or wrong. It just means that we have to have a fully thought through perspective on what Teams is going to be for your organization, because Teams is not a replacement for Skype, and it never has been. And it's not a replacement for SharePoint, OneDrive, or any of the other workloads. Instead, it should be the place where all these things come together into a cohesive experience. And that's the duty of all of us on the phone, to create those experiences for our organizations and make sense of these Lego pieces that come with Microsoft 365.
Yeah, this team's first approach, I think, is a great way to kind of look at the organization, look at productivity, and even talk about, what are some of our legacy processes? What are some things we can plug into this single hub experience? Where I think in the past it was all about the intranet or
Hmm.
sales portal versus your departmental portal, and then there's your personal productivity space, and all these things were different initiatives. And now with this kind of digital transformation and digital kind of enterprise approach, it gives us this opportunity to say, how do we reduce the context switching? How do we actually use this in a single tool, in a single interface, to where we can reduce the amount of surface that somebody has to do in their day, where they're jumping from thing to thing to thing, and reduce that context switching with this single hub.
Exactly, because we've seen this with intranet moving into the digital workplace, right? So now we have notifications coming to our phones. We have those notifications then becoming emails, becoming a bunch of other things just piling up where you're getting information in triplicate. And maybe even more form factors of the same information over and over again, not to mention the threaded conversations that come from it. And being able to keep up can be a challenge. And then once you start to pile in critical line of business applications, that kind of takes it over the top because now that's the stuff you really want to concentrate on, but you may have a lot of noise in your way for getting there. And we're going to provide a few concepts for getting around some of that noise and, leveling out your signal to noise ratio. And as I stated earlier, all of us have at least four clouds that we deal with. There's a Microsoft 365 cloud, there's some type of CRM, whether it's Salesforce, Dynamics, something else. There's also an ITSM story for IT service management, whether it's ServiceNow, Freshdesk. There's a lot of those out there, and of course, human resource information systems such as ADP, Workday, PeopleSoft, and others. And what we're finding is that if we can do this right with some preference from the user, as well as a proper AI strategy and some other things to help us reduce that signal to noise ratio, we can be a better servant via Teams to executives, information workers, mobile first employees, such as your Salesforce and other people like fleet services and other people who are out there in the field per se. And then your first line workers, whether they are in a factory, a manufacturing floor, they could also be in a fleet. But regardless, if we are dutiful with these four clouds and our on-prem information, then we can reach a Zen point of operational effectiveness.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter whether you're a legal organization, a hospital, a construction company. It's amazing to me how still each time there's a way to translate that where it's like here's your enterprise platforms and tools, here's how they plug in, here's what the mobile experience is going to be like, here's what that line worker experience is going to be like.
Yeah.
And then you got your back office HQ folks, your information workers who these days are also working from home, but
Yep.
there's all that super powerful empowerment that happens as a result. And I love the executive story too, where there's so much more executive engagement from a platform like this, where you can do your town halls, you can do your message from the CEO, where those things can plug not only into an intranet that ends up somewhere buried, but actually making it much more visible in terms of how the employees work. And I'm absolutely excited about the kind of the team's home experience of being able to have an enterprise message that comes in as well as your kind of task-based personal experience as well, and how this whole thing really comes together with hundreds of integrations right out of the box.
That's right. And just as a future note, anytime we talk about first line workers, we are talking about the front line. And so it could be first line workers, we could use it interchangeably with frontline workers. And there's a host of other idioms, but all those things work together. All right. And we mentioned earlier this context switching thing, and our email inboxes are the real guilty party. And those are the things that are weighing us down. So we're never going to kill email, I think. That's just my perspective. I know other people have different perspectives on it. But as we start to add work streams for each one of these four clouds, you're already seeing that influence on your personal productivity, your group collaboration effectiveness, your operational effectiveness, and of course, just the overall sizes of our inboxes are just inflating and may not be optimized. So what we're trying to do here is make sure that we get to the point of optimizing that for organizational effectiveness sake. And a lot of these concepts have been really gone into detail by Ephraim Fried in 2015 on his vision for the digital workplace and what we call the modern workplace through teams. But regardless, a lot of this thing is we want to make sure that your day is not trapped in email.
Yeah, I absolutely think when I think about how my preference would be, instead of have everything just pile up into one massive heap,
Hmm.
imagine if I could have, events and my projects actually the communications related to those projects be in the context of those projects. It makes my life so much easier when I'm working on a project. I can work, I can still work top to bottom without all that task switching of having to jump between thing to thing to thing, where each email, there's no relationship between the one that was before it and the one that's after it, where with channels and my ability to organize things by team, it makes my life so much easier. And I personally end up, I'll check my email in the morning, I'll check my email in the afternoon, but I try not to do it, it's so much. But when I'm, say, working, I'm actually working in the channel, I'm working with my team, and they feel so much closer from a perspective of, hey, my team's right there. If I need to reach out, I can. The chats are so much more persistent, and being able to pull people into a channel or at mention folks, it provides context right there, right in the work that I'm doing.
That's right. And as we start to move on, we start to see not just benefits from Teams and the basics of chat, collab, meetings, and telephony, because I think those are just table stakes now, right? We expect to have that foundation and that common place for communicating, collaborating, and being productive in our organization. But now we start to layer in some of the Teams platform benefits, and that's where we really start to get that organizational effectiveness score up within our respective companies. Take a look at the total economic impact of Microsoft Teams platform commission study from June, because it really goes through three major factors that I think affect all of us today. And that is that we're looking to, for savings, right? We're looking for hard numbers that produce ROI within our organizations to say, hey, adopting Microsoft 365 in whatever capacity we've done so can provide benefit back to the organization. And right now, there are three major places we want to focus. First, of course, is productivity savings from the Microsoft Teams platform. Organizations are looking to save 8.8 million to 21 million on just that alone.
Yeah, and
Next, go
when
ahead.
I look at this as well, I think about the fact that Teams has a number of benefits across the
Hmm.
organization, whether it's support desk, the help desk kind of experience, or HR. But and I think that they're scratching the surface on the application development savings, because it's the Power Platform, as an example. It's so much more pluggable, and it's very empowering for the business, where so many organizations really don't have a place where the business can solve their own problems. So it's I think there's a lot of empowerment that really can happen and should happen in an organization, with when we talk about things like center of excellence, where IT can actually empower the business to do self-help and to being able to build their own solutions. It's really, really powerful.
Exactly. But under that umbrella of governance, as you're indicating, right? Because if
Absolutely.
IT is offering a service, then you can get to that that end state that is most desirable, where IT owns the platform and governs the platform, and your users can build their solutions within it and thrive there. Because if you look at help desk and HR savings, that's a huge piece in the middle, I think, because that's one of the leading fears that we see from some of our customers, and that's why change management becomes such a big story on both the communicators and change management front, but also on the IT and help desk side of things, making sure that we have the proper readiness to bring on this change, right? And making people ready, willing, and able to adopt that change is really key. And then you hit the nail on the head a second ago, Joel, like saving on some of our application development cycles, whether it's empowering people to build their own apps because they know their data, they know their processes, and they just need to put some forms on top of it, or just kind of requalifying what makes an enterprise app. Because you'll see some case studies where we're building enterprise applications within Teams and the Power Platform alone. And that's before we open a copy of Visual Studio or any of those other applications that are more hardcore and owned by IT and some of those shared services. So just keep on lookout on all these different things. We're going to talk a lot about this in the following slides, but these are the places that we're really looking to save and optimize and show that return on investment. So moving on, how do we get started? All right. There's always a ton of use cases for teams. Finding a use case for teams is not hard. But picking the right use case that provides, maximum impact to your organization that can also start that groundswell of, requirements and using the platform and making sure that all of our investments and all that hard work that we put in to make everyone mobile right now and for remote work, that doesn't get squandered once we start moving back into offices, once things start to level set, right? And here are three key places, or like a few others that I would want to mention too. But one is, how do we integrate business process systems and applications with teams to improve overall operational efficiency, right? Like this could be something where, we're collaborating on Salesforce information within Teams and then writing that back, right? Without the use of the Power Platform, and just using some of the basic connectors and whatnot. Some of those building blocks, whether it's, putting an app into Teams that's well governed, or, having automations and integrations and whatnot that just follow your governance strategy. Next, of course, the Power Platform is in the middle of all of this when it comes to line of business solutions and business applications. Whether you're rendering them via a bot, via a tab, or some of those things that we're going to talk about with Joel in just a couple seconds, all those things help to build that modern workplace that we're talking about. But finally, and one of the bigger things I'm excited about, is how do we reimagine employee experience through Microsoft Teams, making it the center for employee productivity, and bringing some of those concepts that we've learned via intranet, via collaboration on the Microsoft 365 stack, and AI and other concepts all into one cohesive package that helps us to be more productive in our day and improve the collaboration and limit some of that signal to noise ratio that we were talking about, making the signal much stronger. But without further ado, let's get into Teams as a platform. Let's dive into it. I know, Joel, you're really excited about this, so let's get into this section of the conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, let's dive right in here. And I think that this one, I noticed there were a few people on in the intros who talked about migration. Some who are migrating from Skype, or some migrating from Cisco. It's the unified communication part of Teams, kind of this telephony side of the house, to say focus on calling, chats, and meetings. A lot of that is really the part that's visible. I like this kind of iceberg example of, when you look at an iceberg, you see the part that's out of the water, but ultimately there's so much more of that iceberg that's actually under the water. In fact, it really depends on the iceberg as to how much is above or below. But when you look at Skype, pretty much it is what you see. Sometimes there's a little bit of, say, custom dev around some kind of calling support experience, as an example. But for the most part, it is what it looks like. When you talk about Teams, there's so much more that you actually got to dive into to be able to see. Sure, there's calling, chats, and meetings, but there's so much more in this new collaboration side of Teams. And I say new just from a perspective of, if you were coming from Skype, you move over your stuff, you do your migration, but ultimately there's so much more of kind of this hidden, rich collaboration type of feature set. And it's actually the pluggable side of Teams as well, where you look at Cisco WebEx, or Cisco Teams, you're not going to see the storage, the rich collaboration side of it. Sure, you can talk back and forth, and even say something like Slack, you're missing out on the real collaboration and integration that you get when you're plugged into the Microsoft 365 suite. And even if you are using Teams, and maybe you've got Box, your ability to plug right into Box for storage, it's super powerful, because when people are talking, they're often talking about an image, or they're talking about a document, and that integrated rich experience of being able to collaborate with other users on documents, I think that that's actually where it really, really shines. I've had people who've been using Teams for months, and didn't realize they could open up Word and start collaborating inside the Word document, right inside of Teams, or people working together on PowerPoint. You start the meeting and all of a sudden you're working together on the PowerPoint. It's something we do every day. In fact, I was doing that this morning with Ron. It's absolutely something that is a game changer. You know, a lot of us, hey, maybe we were doing some lightweight document management with SharePoint, but when you add Teams on top of that, or as the interface, it really lights it up and makes it that much easier to do document collaboration. And it goes beyond that when you start talking about plugging in uh, applications, whether they're off the shelf applications or even building in Power Platform solutions with, say, connectors, bots, the channels. You know, we used Poly just a couple days ago to do kind of a poll on the team. But there's bots that we use as well for, say, scheduling. You know, I use the Cortana for scheduling every so often when I have a hard time getting something on somebody's calendar. Um, but this idea of the channels, the ability to organize things in teams, a lot of people, they found their productivity around being able to pin specific users in Skype, so it makes it easier to, say, send out a chat to a group. But the persistence is what I really love in teams, of being able to have my team have ongoing conversations, and I can go back to those conversations. The files are right there. I can open them up in SharePoint if I need to, but for the most part, they're just right there. And if I'm having a one-on-one, it automatically stores it in my OneDrive and shares it to that user, where I can easily track and see what I've shared, and it's doing the right thing. And I think that's kind of what was missing before with your old school Office 365 experience. It was, here's a bunch of tools. Now with Teams, and especially with this Teams first approach, I'm doing the right thing with OneDrive. I don't even have to think about it, because when I share a file, it knows whether it should be shared in the context of the team, and it, automatically stores it in a channel, so it's easy to find, like as a folder if I'm in the SharePoint interface, but it's in the channel from the Teams interface, and it's contextual. Makes such a huge difference. And as somebody who has done large events on top of Teams, and I'm talking large events as in over 13,000 attendees, we ran some Teams live events, having over 1,000 people connected to some of those events, running concurrently. We had over 22 concurrent events running at the same time. Teams really scales in a fantastic way for being able to run large events, and being able to, organizing that event. Just it's a fantastic platform, and has been able to be something that we've been able to build solutions around as well.
Yeah, that's right, Joel. I think that the folks at Microsoft talked about how they expanded the infrastructure, 60x in the last 4 months in order to accommodate those kinds of things and make sure we have that scale and some of the pieces that you're talking about. And it's been really interesting to see, one, the growth of the platform, and also just the versatility, where now, like, you're looking at the Teams logo at the bottom right, and then there's the other pieces as like the inside of the wheel and spoke. But then when you look at the outer sides of this, there is a, bring your own app story to this, which is really strong. A lot of these things do work better on the Microsoft side, but you can have lots of success with your current investments. But the bigger story here is that, it's Teams and things, right? So it can be Teams and Zoom, Teams and Slack, Teams and other things, with Teams as the overall, wrapper for the experience, but you can still levy some of those investments, whether you're doing it as an in-between phase for your roadmap or something a little bit different. You're able to embrace the platform and make it work the same way that your organization does.
Yeah, and I know we've been talking for a while. I actually want to jump out and show you something um, that the NBA is actually using related to Teams.
Yeah, go for it.
Um, I think that this is kind of mind blowing a little bit for me when I think about what's possible with Teams, and this absolutely wouldn't have happened without COVID. Um, And hopefully the audio comes through. I did check the box. So check this out. This is a 1 minute 20-second clip from the NBA, and I'm going to talk over it just a little bit. But before I click start, I want to just tell you the NBA has embraced teams like no other organization. Um, they, we can't do basketball like we used to, right? Well, the NBA has they 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 can't invite their fans into their games, right? Well, they're doing it virtually now, and they're using Microsoft Teams. So let me, without further ado, I want to show you how the NBA has approached bringing teams into basketball games. And this isn't a video about teams. This is actually the NBA. So here we go.
5 games of hoops on a Monday. I'm Bo Estes with the fast break from NBA.com. The Jazz defeated the Nets 112 to 107.
Check it out. Right.
Rudy Gobert led Utah in scoring. He had 20 on the game. The Kings came back to beat the Clippers 106 to 102. Bogdan Bogdanovic led Sacramento in scoring. He had 21 points, including 4 3-pointers on the game. The Lakers down the Washington Wizards 123 to 116.
There you go.
R. Smith on fire from outside. He was 6 of 7 from range, finishing with 21 on the game. The rookie, Rui Hachimura, had 19 at a loss for the Wizards. It was the Orlando Magic hanging on to win by 4 over the Denver Nuggets, 114 to 110. Gary Clark led the Magic in scoring. He had 17 points on the game. And finally, the New Orleans Pelicans stomped the Milwaukee Bucks.
Okay, I'll just stop it right there. So check out behind the basket. You can see there's Microsoft Teams. In fact, you can see in the top, very top left corner, you can see the Teams logo, or at least to some respect, with the fans who are, tapping into the game, watching. And in the last part of this clip, you'll actually see a little bit of cheering going on. One of the great things is that the players have said they've needed is they really want to be able to see the fans and be able to hear the fans. And so in this last 15 seconds, you'll be able to see a little bit of the cheering going on.
124 to 103, J.J. Redick pouring in 20 points. He was 4 of 7 from range in the victory. And that'll do it for your fast break from NBA.com.
Pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. I think that's exciting stuff. So in this next section, we're talking about Teams as a platform. And what's interesting there is just, so the whole Microsoft suite is integrated right into Teams. So whether it's Word, Excel, the whole Office suite, but also SharePoint, Planner, OneNote, Stream, even Yammer. Like, so you see all this kind of rich integration right into Teams. But there's also third-party tools, like ADP has a first-party app that they've built right inside of Teams. DocuSign, Poly, Wrike, Trello. There's quite a few first-party. The developers themselves of those companies have actually built for Teams their own applications that integrate right into Teams, so that you can have a kind of a native experience of those tools, but inside of Teams. Now, the next tier we go down, we talk about this, the Power Platform, and these are kind of low-code, no-code dev automations types of tools. Power Apps was originally designed as a tool that would be mobile first, a kind of experience for building out applications, and it's continued to be an incredible application experience for not only mobile and tablets, but also desktop experience, and being able to do that native in iOS, Android, as well as, say, Mac and Linux, being able to build applications once and be able to use it across platforms. And that can plug directly into Teams, where you're inside of Teams and you've got this Power App interface, and being able to add it as a tab or add it in that kind of native experience. The Power BI dashboards and reports gives you your analytics, and again, this both can be exposed as chat messages when you're having a conversation with somebody about a Power BI report, but also again like as a tab or integrated right into your team. So being able to have your analytics as well as an integrated, richer experience with Power BI, and the Power Automate is your flow. That's your workflows. Those of you who may have been using SharePoint for workflow, we're actually going to give you a couple slides tomorrow talking about that SharePoint 2010 workflow to the Power Platform. And absolutely, that's very much about Power Automate, which has hundreds of connectors to allow you to build your applications, to be able to flow information. As an example, I've seen a lot of people where when they were trying to move from, say, Box to move to be able to leverage Teams, they basically have, if somebody were to post it to the old location, they would have a flow, which is basically what Power Automate builds, that essentially would move their documents into their repository. And there's a lot of powerful examples of how people have used Power Automate to take critical business processes, build them on Power Automate, and be able to do their approvals and as well as full-on workflows and automation. And there's even a lot of RPA functionality, the robotic functionality as well. The Power Virtual Agents, basically building your own chat bots that you can plug in, whether it's into a Power App or being able to plug those into, say, a website. Being able to have the adaptive cards, which support a lot of these different Power Platform tools, so that you can actually build a rich set of functionality and have that exposed in Teams or exposed in your Power App. And then across all these, you see a number of kind of back-end solutions, vertical solutions, horizontal solutions for your enterprise, whether it's departmental tools or LOB integration, again, process automation, and so on. Lots of rich things that you can actually build as part of this. So when you talk about your productivity tools that you need to use, and then being able to integrate custom-built tools built purposefully by the enterprise or by the business or by IT or even your line of business.
Yeah, that's right, Joel, because really this comes down to empowering your employees. And, these are all building blocks moving towards that direction, but it's really on, your culture, your organization, and of course, best practice, which we bring to the table. That's how we help you to solve those problems and help to make sense of the huge suite of tools that are available to you.
Yeah,
and of course,
Teams brings that all together. Yeah,
that's right.
And when we talk about this Teams first approach, in that previous example, we kind of talked about you got your tools and then you got all these different things. Microsoft 365 and Teams, it actually pulls together the whole tenant. If you think about it, you've got your communication set of tools, and there's lists now that Microsoft just released last week. So you got all your data, your videos, your files. You may have built an intranet or communication set of sites. Being able to have that set of rich functionality, as well as the collaboration and the communication, whether it's Outlook and your email, or whether it's your chats, calls, meetings, and tasks, or even your communities, like say in Yammer, being able to bring all that communication, collaboration together, plus the application platform, the Power Platform brings to it, it essentially gives you this really powerful single interface that kind of marries up Teams and SharePoint into a single experience. And it doesn't stop there. When you think about the power that Azure brings from an infrastructure perspective, or even the cognitive services of Azure, where you can extend the applications you build with Power Platform to then take advantage of Azure or Dynamics. So there's kind of taking advantage of all the Microsoft clouds. And the great thing is Teams kind of gives you that single pane of glass interface to be able to bring in your Azure-based workloads as well as the business apps that you're building that leverage your customer data or other um, Flex-based applications as well, or the data Flex stuff now
Oh yeah.
that continues to expand on these concepts.
Exactly. But when you start looking at that expansion of concepts, right, it's all about building apps within teams in order to make sure that you're reducing the context switching and providing more value to employees to help them get their work done during the day. And we really can't look away from that because that's really the end goal, whether it is you building your own apps within the Power Platform, bringing in other apps from different partners and connectors or whatever, or just plain building custom solutions. It's really taking a lot of those things to the next level. And right now, that's the easiest path, right? Because now that technology has, progressed, building these integrations aren't going to be like multi-year operations. Instead, you can roll out a form within a week or, build a solution within a couple of weeks. And we just had a hackathon and we had 5 different Power Platform entries built within a 7-day span, right? Because we're able to mobilize that quickly with the Lego pieces and build some fabulous stuff.
Did you have a demo that you wanted to dive into, Ron?
No, go ahead. I think you had the rounding thing. Let's do that.
Yeah, I need to try and log into that. Let me have you jump into this as I prep for that.
Yeah, no problem. So another thing that you have to support you in this journey, of course, are just templates and apps from Microsoft. And if you're from that SharePoint space, which I know a lot of you have said that you are, you may remember the Fab 40 and some of those things. And to quote a few different movies and whatnot, this ain't that, right? These are applications that take the best practices for building solutions within teams, right? So using the bot framework, adaptive cards, and the Power Platform, and including Power BI, Power Apps, and whatnot, and taking those things, making them into templates that you can expand from there. So depending on your use case, whether it's creating landing places and workspaces for people managers, that's a common use case that every organization has. Because often, as we progress in our careers, we're going to manage between 6 and however many different people, and creating a team that is templated just to that use case can be something that can resonate with any organization and be relevant to them. Next, of course, is just company communication and being able to perpetuate a lot of those messages as far as the things you would normally send out via an alert on your intranet or a news article. Now you can use Teams as an engine to bring people back to your intranet, or keep all that information within Teams depending on what your focus is. Bots are great for FAQ information. Right now, when dealing with COVID, having timely information, not only from the World Health Organization and the CDC, but also your organization's reopening plan. We've helped a lot of our customers build solutions for, informing people via SharePoint, empowering them through Teams to grab that information, and then, positioning a bot in both places to help answer some of that FAQ information. As we are working remote, I think that connecting with our fellow employees becomes another challenge, and that's a great place where the crowdsourcer bot and the icebreaker bot and expert finder features really come into play when we want to either find someone who has a certain amount of expertise in a topic, or just simply meet people that we haven't met before and being able to, have some of those experiences that we wouldn't normally have because we'd be in the office and almost preying on chance to discover people or, crowdsource information. Now we can take a different route for getting those things done. And even going back to the previous slide about the Power Platform versus some of the ways we used to work, right? Like SharePoint workflow and all the things like InfoPath and that stuff that comes along with it. Now is the perfect time to transform how we gather information and build our applications. A lot of us are looking for a one-to-one with InfoPath and other things. Well, that's not going to happen. Instead, it's more of a reconsidering of how we work, the things that do work, the things that we've had challenges with, and some new opportunities, and being able to drive some of that stuff forward. Looks like you're bringing your demo up now, Joel. But regardless, there are a lot of good starting points for apps and templates within Teams. And like I said, you're not locked into these things, but they serve as a great foundation as either a framework or a starting point for building something that really speaks to culture and voice of your organization.
So for this demo, let me just kind of preface this with, this is yet another app experience that was built as a result of COVID. And this one actually kind of strikes at the heart of it. Essentially, what was happening was we had a problem with PPE. Early on, nurses, as they would basically go from room to room to room, every time they were going in, they'd need to disinfect. And in the past, it wasn't a big deal to be able to get new gloves, new masks, and so on every single time they would visit a room where there was known infection. So this idea of virtual rounding would reduce the number of visits they would have to be able to do. So essentially, in each room, they would have a screen or a computer, which is not so unusual. And so they were able to take advantage of having teams on each of these machines and have a standing meeting. So basically, what you can see is we have the location, so basically the different buildings, the floors, and then you can see who's in what room, and a standing meeting. So basically, the nurse could click join room, and it would automatically go right into that room. And that could then be configured based on any given patient or whatever. We created so Microsoft created this template. We ended up at Perficient during this hackathon that Ron's talking about. We extended it where we created some additional room info where just because the nurses are busy doesn't necessarily mean that other people can't actually help. So if we came up with this concept of, imagine if the patients each had an iPad or some kind of tablet in their room, where for common things that they need, whether it's, obviously they are hot, so them being able to request a temperature change for their room, or requesting a fan be brought or a blanket or that kind of thing, being able to use a Power App to be able to make requests with a simple click. But as well, everybody's busy, people are running around. Wouldn't it be great if the people who are in the room could actually fill out survey, for whoever their nurse is? So based on the time of day, it could automatically swap out who their nurse is and allow them to launch a survey. If they've got additional questions, this takes advantage of that integration with virtual agents, where we actually built a custom bot called Patient Care Bot that would guide you through ordering your meal. And again, let's not have the nurse have to deal with food. Let's have her focus on care. And especially since, things have expanded where a nurse traditionally may have been focusing on 3 patients, they may now have her be focused on 10 patients. So the ability to scale is really important, and being able to have a bot to support that scale, where the bot could say, hey, what would you like for lunch? Guide you through things, let you know about ingredients, and so on. So it really kind of makes things a lot more simple from that perspective. And we built a couple other things into that, like, say, whether it's the bot with Power Virtual Agents. And this Power Virtual Agent itself could be plugged into plugged into to that experience, like into the web or into Teams or into the Power App. And we also took advantage of some of the Teams capabilities around translation. So the idea that the live events capability does support simultaneous translation. So we looked into some of those features related to being able to have a doctor call, your ability to bring in other folks into that, as an example, so that when you're being able to invite additional family members into a conversation with your doctor, and if language was a problem, we could take advantage of Teams from that functionality as well. Pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
we did as well integrate some flows where we actually had some Power Automate. So as it relates to cafeteria food, or whether it's bringing supplies and so on, being able to take advantage of having facilities be able to support the hospital and nurses, so that they're not so overloaded. It's like, hey, let's share the wealth. If we can automate and simplify things by the click of a button. And speaking of click of a button, there's actually a feature inside of Flow where you can actually have a physical button where if they click that button, that means do this thing. It'll actually kick off a workflow to notify facilities or notify whoever else in the hospital needs to. So there's some really kind of powerful capabilities here when you start looking at taking advantage of the whole Power Platform.
Exactly. And this just really fills in that middle goal of what we're talking about, right? Like taking those templates, extending them into something that's native to how your business operates and how you're looking at things, right? And then the last piece of this, I know we're running a little bit short on time, but one, if we start using some of those classic development things that are out there, a few of you have seen this via the maturity of the SharePoint framework and SPFX, but using modern coding standards and best practices, you can start to build solutions for your organization, right? And so let's start reimagining the employee experience through Microsoft Teams and getting to this last piece of the conversation. And so there are a few key tenets that we tend to drive our customers towards. First, of course, is clear purpose and personas. You are not rebuilding your intranet here. Instead, you're using your intranet as a content engine to feed employees depending on their persona and the information that they find to be most useful. Next, take a look at the Teams Home app. It's an MVC-based application that allows you to tailor it to whatever your needs are. But the thing is that this becomes a highly branded, highly personalized experience within Teams itself. And then, of course, from there, you can start to add in some of the things that add to productivity, like Joel was talking about, right? And whether you put it in this particular application or somewhere else, the bottom line is that you start to reach those benefits that we're talking about, not just from a chat, communication, and collaboration perspective, but now organizational effectiveness becomes key, and you can start charting that stuff. We'll talk about tygraph in a second and some of those other areas, but regardless, like this is where the hay is made, right, so to speak, because I'm out of Atlanta, so there are plenty of idioms like that. Regardless, let's take a look at what this could possibly be, right? Because I realize that screenshots don't really do it for you. So I'm going to start with a first line worker view. I'm using the desktop because I couldn't get my mobile started, but the ideal scenario is that you start in mobile, right? I think one of the things that we've used a lot and we've learned is that from a change management perspective, you know, um, technology folks will often adopt early. Salespeople, lawyers, and doctors are especially tricky. And for a lot of these folks, pajama time counts. So we're really looking for, from a first line worker view, let's start there. This one in particular is for an employee named Alex. He has a few key pieces of information that he needs, but this is not stress on, corporate news. Instead, we're giving him some vital COVID-19 information. We have his tasks and meetings that are coming up. new team members, what he needs to be aware of, and some line of business applications on the right. On the left, we'll see people who are on shift and some announcements that are key to his role. But you'll also see that, you can keep scrolling on that if you need to, but a lot of that information about announcements is really placed on the page by its importance to his day. Now, if we want to switch from this persona to the information worker, it's totally different. It looks a little bit more like an intranet, right? Because now we're starting to bring the tools and applications that people use on a regular basis to heart because really we want to be able to jump to those. But then we have events that are going on around us and information that we need to know about, whether it's a task coming up or some of the corporate news that's more vital to either my role, my location, or just things I haven't read yet that need to be bubbled up to my attention. And once you start getting to this level, now you can start driving activity and you're funneling down the core information that's all over the place into one experience and using user preferences, AI, and some other pieces to really make that happen. But that's not it because that's just the information I need to consume to start my day, right? What about when I finally want to start working? Let's start looking at that. And whether it's a personal dashboard using some of the templates or the task work that's out there already, that's where you start to have that shine, where you can bring in information from those multiple clouds into one UI and have information such as corporate announcements put in place next to the planner information that I need per day, or even reminders for birthdays for my team. And of course, email, because we can't get rid of that. And we can integrate Dynamics, Salesforce, ServiceNow, or any of those other applications into the UI to build a cohesive experience for your employees and then grow it from there, because that's what this is all about, is growing from that foundation and expanding what we're offering to our users. But having that launch pad for your day, starting with the home app, right? And this is one that we particularly branded for Perficient that goes over our a couple of personas, but then adding in a custom application like what you're seeing in the My Day dashboard and some of those types of things really help to drive this thing to the next level and really embrace that theme of, taking teams to the next level for your organization.
And I see this is also when you talk about your ability to really customize the experience and bring these other tools in to reduce the context switching. The adaptive cards allow you then to also now to actually dive in and do the task rather than having to go yet again kind of open up another application. And from a licensing perspective, sometimes that can actually reduce the footprint of how many people actually need to be in those other tools and reduce desktop support and all that kind of thing as
Yeah,
well.
definitely. And cooking that desktop experience is a key piece to this as well. I'm sure Dave Chapman will talk about some of that stuff. And then bringing in things like your employee survey and other like simple applications and surveys and like power apps into a UI like that really helps to, one, push the needful things into the user's atmosphere where they are. But two, you can also have fun like your pets at Perficient and other things that, may not necessarily be mission critical, but they can definitely help with your productivity during the day and even some of your emotional stability, to be totally honest with you. Um, Overall, I realize that we're about 3 minutes over. I want to make sure that we get a quick break to, you know, transition from Joel and myself to our next speaker. But we want to thank you for sitting in on the keynote. Keep in mind that next we have change management for teams to realize return on investment coming up. And then after that, we'll have adoption and success with Power BI and tyGraph. So stay tuned.